Hello everyone. One of my goals for this year is to do more communication about how we are doing as a district. And one place where you as a staff have indicated via our employee engagement survey that you want to hear more about is our financial situation. So we thought we'd pull this video together about what happened at our annual meeting. The annual meeting, if you recall, is an opportunity for our community to learn about what's happening in the district, for our community to learn about our budget, to learn about our financial situation, about our levy, etc. And we had this year's annual meeting on Monday, October 24th. Now there are a couple things that we talked about at the meeting that you've heard before, or most of you have heard before, but they are probably worth repeating and they won't be a surprise to you. But again, they are worth repeating. The first is that we have been declining in enrollment. This slide is a look at our September membership history for the last 12 years. Membership represents a rolling 3-year average of our student enrollment. As you can see, we continue to suffer from declining student enrollment. That is a trend that actually began in 2002-2003. Our most recent applied population study forecasts that trend will continue into the near future. That has a direct financial implications for our district because of the Wisconsin school funding formula. So student enrollment is down. State aid has also trended down in recent years. This slide shows our state aid over the last 12 years. You can see that it is nowhere near what it was 6 years ago. Less aid has resulted in us having to rely more on local taxpayers to fund district operations. We should assume these trends of declining student enrollment and declining or flat state aid will continue for the near future. That is why we've had to make and will have to continue to make adjustments to meet our financial obligations. The good news is that our challenges would have been much more difficult had it not been for the operational referendum that was approved by the voters in 2014. This slide shows our revenue limit over the years. The colored portion shows those years when we had the non-recurring operational referendum. You can see how that permanently became part of our revenue limit after the 2014 referendum. The current state budget provides no increase in how much each district receives per student in its revenue limit calculation. Without our referendum, the bars representing 15-16 and 16-17 would have actually gone down instead of up. That brings us to this year's budget. Approximately $40,400,000 that includes both our general and special education funds. Now, where does that money come from? This slide is a breakdown of our revenue by source. You can see that over half of our revenue comes from our community. It wasn't always that way. Take a look at this slide. 7 years ago, we received more than 48% of our funding from general state aid and other state sources, compared to a little more than 41% from our tax levy. Contrast that with this year, where 51.4% of our revenue comes from the tax levy, 36.2% from general state aid, and 5.9% from other state sources. If we go back even further to 2006-2007, our state aid totaled 55.3% of all revenues, while our levy accounted for 32.2%. Long story short, because of what has been happening at the state level, we rely increasingly on our local community to finance operations. We are fortunate to have a very, very generous community here, but that means we also have to do our part here in the district. That means being good financial stewards. Where does our money go right now? Like most service businesses, most of our money goes toward personnel. This slide is a breakdown of our expenses. 78% of our general and special education expenses go to personnel, 53.8% for salaries, and 24.2% for benefits. That's pretty comparable to last year. And most of our expenses in those funds go toward instruction, as you can see from this slide. Instruction in this context refers to things like our licensed educators, educational assistants, and direct classroom costs for materials. Support refers to areas such as our libraries, counselors, psychologists, social workers, speech and language services, as well as things such as transportation, custodial, maintenance, and facility costs. So there are some of the highlights from this year's budget and annual meeting. What does that mean for our local property owners? This slide shows the history of our mill rate since 2005-2006. And this slide shows the estimated school tax impact on a homeowner for this current year based on last year. This represents the school portion of a tax bill on a $200,000 home, assuming an increase in value from previous years. This year, the additional referendum funding had a minimal impact on property taxes because of a drop in how much we are levying to pay off long-term debt. Long story short, when you look at all these charts, it shows that we have a very generous community. They have stepped up and they have done their part to help support us in supporting our students to meet their future. If you recall, the referendum passed in 2014, steps up every year till it's capped in year 4. We are now in year 3. And after 4 years, the additional taxpayer support will increase or exceed $7 million for an ongoing operational budget. Without that support of our community, the financial challenges we face would be much more daunting and much more severe. That is why it's vital we all work together. We all do our part. We be fiscally responsible and creative to meet the needs of all of our students in preparing them for the future. Thank you for your time. Thank you for everything that you are doing for the kids, for this community. And please, if you have any questions on this, please don't hesitate to ask. Thank you.